Hello, algebra students. Hopefully you had a nice weekend. Hopefully you got out, did something fun. Today we're going to be moving on to section 12.7 about probability and odds. So wherever you were taking notes last week, whether you printed them out or you're writing them in like a notebook or something, take that out, make sure you're ready to go. And we're going to start with some vocabulary here today. So our first vocab word is outcome. The outcome is the result of a single trial. You're going to see these examples on the side. I am going to talk about them in just a second, but I'm going to go over the definitions first. The sample space is all the possible outcomes. An event is a specific outcome that you're looking for. So that's kind of categorizing things. And finally, our favorable outcome is that outcome that matches the event that we're looking for. So with all of these definitions, we're going to be thinking about a standard six-sided die. So, there it is. Maybe I'll draw 2 and then 3 and then, I don't know, 6, something like that. You all know what a standard die looks like. And an outcome would be you rolling the die. And you see what number you get. That is going to be our results. That is our outcome. So I rolled a 5. There's my outcome. It's a 5. My sample space is everything that I could get when I roll this dice. So when I roll this die, I could see a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. I don't know which one it's going to be, but that's my sample space. That's everything that it could be. Now, an event, for instance, might be like rolling an even number. So I might be trying to roll an even number, but I'm looking for a specific kind of roll. Sometimes it's a little bit more specific than even numbers. Maybe it's the event is rolling a 3. A favorable outcome is when your outcome matches your specific outcome, your event. So in our example of rolling an even number, what would be a favorable outcome? That'd be rolling a 2, a 4, or a 6. Now, when we're talking about probability, to calculate our probability, or maybe I guess I should start with this notation right here, P parentheses something. That stands for, and I don't have a lot of space, probability of blank. So the probability of an event, how are we going to calculate it? We're going to take our number of favorable outcomes and we're going to divide that by the total possible outcomes, our sample space. Our theoretical probability. That word theoretical, we're not going to say all the time, but that's what we're going to be calculating. The theoretical probability is the likelihood that an event will occur. So let's take a look at our example before moving on really quick. What is the probability of rolling an even number? So if you want to see a quick example, I'll be a little lazy and just put P of even. What are the number of favorable outcomes? There's 2, there's 4, there's 6. There are 3 favorable outcomes. And how many possible outcomes do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So that's all the possible outcomes. So our probability, and we'll get to this in a second, would be something like 1/2. But that is the start of calculating our probabilities. Okay, so the probability of an event is always a number between 0 and 1. 0 on our scale is going to say that it is impossible that this thing happens. So that would be like saying rolling a 7 on a standard die. It's impossible. The probability is 0. And then you have the other end of the scale, which is 1. That means it's always going to happen. If you have a 6-sided die, what's the probability of rolling a number from 1 to 6? It's always going to happen. No matter how many times you roll it, it's always going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So that number 1, if the probability is equal to 1, that means it's always going to happen. Halfway between, our 1/2, our 0.5, that means that it's just right in between. It might occur, it might not. There's an equal chance that it does, that it doesn't. Anything bigger than 0.5 is more likely to happen. Anything less than 0.5, less likely to happen. We're going to be writing our probabilities in 3 possible ways: decimals, percents, and fractions. We got to simplify our fractions. So decimals, maybe the probability of some event is 0.75. How could we write that as a percent? If you remember, to go from decimals to percents, you multiply by 100. That'd be 75%. Finally, as a reduced fraction, you might know this. I hope you know this. You could also write that as 3/4. So we can write our probabilities in any of those 3 ways. All right, let's get to some examples. Our event is flipping a coin. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. Thinking about a coin, it's got 2 sides, heads or tails. It's not going to land on just the side of it. It's either going to land on heads or it's going to land on tails. So let's think about the probability of the coin landing on heads. So our favorable outcome is heads. There's 1 favorable outcome. How many possible outcomes are there when you flip a coin? It's either heads or tails. So that means we're going to have 2 down in the denominator, meaning our probability is going to be 1/2, or 0.5, or 50%. Let's think about picking cards from a deck now. Maybe you don't know this. I'll go through it just in case. In a standard deck of playing cards, there are 4 suits. There are cards 2 through the numbers 10, a jack, queen, king, and an ace of each suit. So there are 13 cards in each suit, which means that there are 52 total cards. So let's think about our event of picking a 3 from a deck of cards. What are the favorable outcomes of picking a 3? Well, you can pick a 3 of hearts, a 3 of diamonds, a 3 of spades, a 3 of clubs. And that's going to be over the total number of cards in a deck. So that is going to be 4 favorable outcomes over our 52 possible outcomes to get our simplified fraction of 1/13. You want to turn it into a decimal. That's 0.077 about, or about 7.7%. Any of those 3 answers works. The fraction gives you the exact answer, though. All right, the complement. This one can get tricky sometimes. So the complement of an event is everything that isn't the event. So let's take a look at some examples. Outcomes of rolling a 6-sided die. You know what those are: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. The favorable outcomes of rolling a 4 or 5, well, that's either rolling a 4 or a 5. What is the complement of rolling a 4 or 5, aka of not rolling a 4 or 5? Well, you can roll a 1, you can roll a 2, a 3, or a 6, giving us 4 unfavorable outcomes. Now, something to look at down here at the bottom of this slide. If you take the probability of an event and you add that to the probability of its complement, you're always going to get 1, because you're saying I either want something or I don't want something, but that's everything that can happen. You either want it or you don't. If we rewrite this a little bit and kind of just solve for our not event, we can subtract over, sorry about that, we can subtract over the probability of the event and subtract it from 1 to get the probability of our not event. So let's take a look at our probabilities of our event happening. Our favorable outcomes, there are 2 out of a possible 6. So the probability right there is 1/3. The probability of our favorable outcomes not happening, well, there are 4 unfavorable, and we're going to put that over 6. So that's 2/3, and 1/3 plus 2/3, oops, sorry about that, is 1. So you always have a probability of an event and its complement. They're always going to add up to 1. Now, odds. Odds are a little bit different than probabilities. So when we're doing these problems, you're going to have to make sure that you're reading the directions. Are you finding the probability or are you finding the odds? So the odds for an event is slightly different. It looks the same, but it's slightly different. It's the number of favorable outcomes over unfavorable outcomes, not over the total, but over the unfavorable outcomes. Now the odds against, so again, another thing that you're going to have to read carefully. Does it say odds for or odds against something? If it says odds against, you're going to do unfavorable over favorable. So odds in favor of flipping tails on a coin. So what's the favorable outcome? It's flipping a tails. What is the unfavorable outcome? This is where this is different. Unfavorable is heads. Just heads, not heads and tails, it's just heads. So we would write 1/1, or sometimes you're going to see it written like a ratio of 1:1 with a little colon in between them. You'll probably see that more often in real world type stuff, not as fractions. Let's take a look at another example to do odds against. Odds against rolling a number less than 3. So we're talking about a standard die, 6 possible outcomes. What are the unfavorable outcomes to rolling a number less than 3? And why am I starting with unfavorable? Because it says the word against. So numbers less than 3, the unfavorable outcomes would be 3, 4, 5, and 6, because 3, 4, 5, and 6 are not less than 3. What are our favorable outcomes of rolling a number less than 3? Well, 1 is less than 3 and 2 is. So we're going to take 3, 4, 5, and 6 and put that over 1 and 2, aka 4/2, which simplifies to 2/1, or we would write that as 2, 2, 1. A lot of the times, again, you'll probably see it written more like that one. But the probability of an event and the odds are different. So just please be careful. Favorable over possible versus our odds where it's favorable over unfavorable or unfavorable over favorable. So let's do one last example here. What is the probability of picking a diamond? So again, if you remember, I said there were 4 suits. In each of the suits, there's a 2 through a 10, and then a jack, queen, king, and an ace. So picking a diamond, there are 13 cards in a standard playing card deck that are diamonds. So that's 13 favorable outcomes over possible, since we're talking about probability. 52 total cards, which gives us a probability of 25%. So please, please notice the difference between odds and probability. Oops, I guess I should get rid of this box, shouldn't I? So on this last slide here, there's some Khan Academy videos linked if you haven't already seen them. If something doesn't make sense that we've been talking about, that you've been trying, that you haven't got your questions answered, this would be a great place to look for some extra resources. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, please send some messages our way, and have a good rest of your day.